This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is my new weight set. No, really, it weighs 10 pounds. The power brick is another 2 pounds. Isn't that awesome? So, you know, that cliche flabby gamer who never lifts any weights, it's gone now. Just carry this around a little bit. All right, I made my joke, but this is really a lovely and impressive 17-inch gaming laptop. Take a look at those vents, right? That's real street cred there if you're a gamer. This is the Acer Predator 17X. This is their highest end in the Predator line, and the Predator line itself is a pretty high-end lineup because, you know, Acer, they started out being the folks who made netbooks. We always associate them with the really affordable kind of low-end stuff. So it's refreshing to see them make something that really goes up against Alienware and other boutique brands. Build quality is impeccable. And the nice thing about this, the exciting thing about this, the thing that should hopefully justify its $3,200 price tag is the NVIDIA GTX 980 card. The desktop card is in this. Granted, it's not the new NVIDIA 10 series card, Pascal, that I just told you should wait for. And even if you're interested in this, you could wait and see what happens. My guess is desktop cards in laptops is a done deal. The manufacturers I've spoken to say they're not going to do it anymore, so this will probably get the GTX 1080 meant for laptops instead for the next iteration. So if you want to wait, I understand. But as one kind of exception to waiting, since this is a desktop card, this is a lot more powerful than your typical gaming laptop. This is also the high-end configuration that just came out. This has a 4K display with wide color gamut, and it has NVIDIA G-Sync too. We're going to look at it now. So just in case the desktop graphics card and the 4K display with G-Sync and high color gamut aren't enough to impress you, especially at this price, right? You want it to do a lot. We have the Intel overclockable, also referred to as unlocked, Core i7-6820HK in here. So you can overclock this thing. And one of the nice things about the Predator is it comes with a software utility, Predator Sense, that actually makes it pretty easy to do. So Predator Sense obviously gives you basic information like your CPU and your GPU temperature, the fan speeds, and all that. Don't be too worried about the temperatures. Right now we do have Fallout 4 running in the background because otherwise the CPUs will take a little rest and a break. So you can move up to faster, and by the way, you can only do this when it's plugged into electricity. It won't run at overclock speeds if you're doing it on battery power. So if we go up to turbo, we can go from the 3.5 gigahertz base up to 4 gigahertz at times. Now it's going to depend on what it's doing in the background as to what you see there. And the GPU overclock is generally by 135 megahertz. That's about it. The nice part here is that this is very stable. There are other overclocked laptops out there, and it's kind of up to you to fiddle with those settings and see what crashes or what causes graphical distortion and what doesn't. And here with this one, these are all pretty stable. They've done a very good job of binning these CPUs for quality and performance at overclock speeds. Braintree Payments is our sponsor for this video, and we want to thank them for their support. It's not easy developing commercial mobile apps, but that doesn't mean accepting payments has to be hard too. Braintree makes integrating mobile payments a breeze. They allow you to accept nearly any kind of payment from any device with a single integration. Yep, even PayPal, Android Pay, whatever the next big thing in payments is. Android, iOS, and JavaScript clients are supported, and there are payments available in a variety of currencies. Their code's elegant, cleanly documented, and they have a simple and flexible SDK. Learn more at braintreepayments.com/techreview. So in terms of internal specs, it's all high-end stuff. The architecture is a little bit interesting on this. We'll get into that in a bit, but it ships with 32 gigs of DDR4 RAM. 64 is max. It has 4 total slots. 2 of those are readily accessible for you, and 2 are not so readily accessible. Again, we'll talk about the internals in more detail later in terms of that. SSD, you got a 512 gig PCIe NVMe SSD that translates into the fastest kind of SSD currently on the market. It's also a terabyte 7200 RPM hard drive to store your bulky stuff, or if I was you, you could consider swapping that out with a SSD so your game load times are quicker too. Killer double shot, Wi-Fi, and Ethernet on board. Good performance there as always. This weighs 10 pounds, folks, 10 pounds. So this is not lightweight, and no joke that power brick weighs about an additional 2 pounds or so. So portability is not what this is about. Battery life, not so much either. You're looking at about 3 hours unplugged, and that's productivity work. If you're going to be playing games, I have 45 minutes or so, and that's about it. There are more affordable models from Acer. There's a Acer Predator 15 and Acer Predator 17. Both of those run a little bit hotter and louder. This one is pretty impossible to get this to be hot or loud. Now, if you're running it overclocked, you will hear the fans, but otherwise this is one of the quieter gaming laptops on the market as gaming laptops go. That means you'll hear the fans a teeny bit, but not really a lot. Of course, that's also true for the MSI GT72 Dominator. A lot of the big ones are cooler. Cooling design starts out seeming normal. Well, it uses Acer's Aero blade design, thin blade metal fans. That's supposed to be quieter. For some laptops that they've made, that is true. For some, it isn't. In this case, they are effectively quite quiet. And so exhausting from here, like just about every gaming laptop. Thank God it's not blasting at your hand, right? So where does it intake air from? Well, there are some vents on the bottom side, very small intake vents, but primarily it sucks in air from the front. Right here we have vents. Air intakes. So it's going to suck in from the front as well. And right there also. And interesting design, there's actually a third fan right under the touchpad. You're not going to feel it when you're playing or games or anything like that or using it, but what it does is it augments the air intake in the front and it continues to exhaust out in the back. Apparently it's very effective because it is, despite the desktop GPU in here and the overclocked CPU, cool and quiet. Again, as gaming laptops go, but even as gaming laptops go, they do tend to be loud. This one is one of the quieter on the market. Even if you're doing something like VR, and the 980 desktop card does let you do VR well. Now, and on the underside, you can see there's little marks for this air intake action obviously going on here too. You know, never muffle the bottom of your laptop, particularly a gaming laptop. Shiny subwoofer here, and you can see we got some dual drivers on each side here. This is 4 stereo speakers plus a subwoofer. Some of the best audio I've ever heard on a laptop. If you want to service this, the common to upgrade things, you have 2 open RAM slots under this door right here. You have your M2 SSD slot in case you want to upgrade that SSD. That was a pretty nice one, so I don't know if you want to. And you have access to the hard drive. Now, if you want to get to the other 2 installed RAM modules and you want to clean out your fans, get to the Wi-Fi card, you're going to have to unscrew all the screws that you see all along the edge of the chassis. And once we take off this access door, which is affixed by only 2 screws, pop-off door is pretty easy, there's 5 more Phillips head screws hidden under here that you'll have to undo and then fight the contentious plastic clips, and then you'll be able to get it off to access more of the internals. Given the fact that the things that most of us do want to access are right here, and the fan openings in the back are large enough that you could vacuum them yourself from the outside, I'm fine with the design. It has a soft touch finish, top and bottom. I mean, it just feels nice. Here, I'm going to sound creepy again, but you just want to kind of touch it. It feels a lot like the Alienware 15 and 17 finish, and that speaks to how premium the product really is. I think it's arguably better looking, although obviously flashier looking, than MSI's gaming laptops with the black brushed aluminum's not bad looking, but you know. And ASUS's laptops, well, they're pretty out there too, and this one just has a little bit more of a quality look and so well put together. Nowhere you're going to find a seam out of place. The bottom locks on so well that even when you undo those screws, the bottom's not going to go anywhere. It's just nicely done by Acer. So the display on this is a real treat. Sure, it's 4K, that's really nice, 17.3 inch, so that means 3840 by 2160 for resolution. IPS is NVIDIA G-Sync, no Optimus, that means no automatic switching graphics because you can't have both. NVIDIA can't make both happen, so it's always going to be using dedicated graphics. But this is a 330 nit, that's bright, matte IPS display, so no reflections, can combat even outdoor lighting, and even more impressive, this has not just full sRGB coverage, it has 95% of Adobe RGB coverage. And calibration on the box was actually quite good as well. So for those of you who are doing professional video editing and photo editing, really, honestly, this is probably overkill for photo editing even, but it's a wonderful display to use. And you're certainly going to be seeing more color than you could ever dream of on most laptops. Contrast is good at 690 to 1, and the hardware white point is also very good at 6800 degrees Kelvin, which is just about where we like to see it. Most laptops tend to be high, so it's obvious that Acer was going for a premium display here to suit not just gamers, but your professional pro apps folks out there. On a laptop this big, you expect plenty of ports, and well, you do get plenty of ports. One thing you don't get is an optical drive. Surprise, surprise. Well, that desktop graphics card does take up added space. We have our killer gigabit Ethernet over here, a full-size display port instead of the usual mini display port, HDMI, 2 USB 3.0 ports, and Hooray, hooray, we have a Thunderbolt 3/USB-C 3.1 port. It's a very forward-looking port. There's not a whole lot of peripherals out there just yet, but it's good to have that for the future, particularly if you're thinking about ways to revive the graphics card when it's kind of no longer up to date 2 years from now. Maybe things like the Razer Core and other external graphics amplifiers will become more affordable than they are now. And we have a lock slot here, though I can't imagine anybody picking this up and running away with it real quick and easily. And on this side, we have our SD card slots, separate headphone and mic jacks, gold-plated, 2 more USB 3.0 ports, and that's where your giant power supply plugs in. We got little stylish things going on here with different textures, like the cutout for the lid tucking in nicely over here. That's pretty standard for gaming laptops these days. They all have some kind of design ornamentation in that area. So with an overclockable CPU and a desktop GPU comes a 330-watt power supply. This is obviously huge. It's incredibly heavy. This is the power supply that comes with the MSI GT72 Dominator with NVIDIA 970, previously 980, and also with the 1070 card, all the same size power supply, around 230 watts. So there's a difference in portability there, obviously, and the amount of current that you're going to be drawing. But now we've switched the Origin PC, the Eon 17 model. This has the NVIDIA 1080 card in it, an overclockable CPU as well. And you can see it uses actually the exact same power supply. So I expect when the Predator does get updated to use NVIDIA GTX 1080, it's going to have the same big honkin' power supply. I love the keyboard on this thing. As a person who types a lot of words every week, we have good key travel here, 2.2 millimeter key travel. Obviously, it's not skinny Ultrabook. You have plenty of room for key travel here. Nice, crisp, well-damped, anti-ghosting keyboard. It's also obviously got your arrow keys and your WASD keys permanently outlined. On the side here, we have programmable macro buttons too. And boy, that's awful darn handy in today's games where you've just got so many different commands that you're assigning. And I have a multi-button mouse, and after a while, I just can't keep track of all the buttons. That really does help out. This is an RGB chroma backlit keyboard. It's zone backlighting, so regional backlighting, not individual keys like the Razer Blade. The trackpad on this is pleasant. It's well behaved. You have dedicated hardware buttons here, and they're soft and easy to press, which I like. That's a matter of preference there, but it's not one of those ones where you end up shifting your finger on the pointing pad because you're wrenching down with your thumb. So I'll take softer any day. Of course, the bad news is in the dark, you have to actually look for and search for those keys. Outlined in red, obviously, over here, and we have an actual button to turn the trackpad on and off. It's green when the trackpad's enabled. It is red when you disable it, and that will also take out the Windows key, which is, generally speaking, the bane of a gamer's existence. So in terms of performance, as you might imagine, short of getting something with an NVIDIA GTX 1080 card, and again, this will probably be refreshed for that. I understand if you wait, I would wait for that to see. This is still, even with the desktop 980 card, one of the fastest gaming laptops on the market today, as it well should be for the price. In terms of benchmarks, we have a mix of overclock and normal speed numbers for you to take a look at there. Overclocking makes the biggest difference in CPU-intensive benchmarks, less so in the graphics because it's not really boosting the graphics all that much. Now, in terms of your game performance, if you're playing a strategy game, it's something like Civ 5, the CPU matters a lot. For most other games, really, it is the graphics card that's the most important thing. So for gaming, we've got Tom Clancy's The Division. That's a pretty demanding game. And first off, we're going to take a look at the good news, which is playing at 1920 by 1080, 1080p resolution. It plays at a solid 60 frames per second, even goes up a little above that. We turn off NVIDIA G-Sync for our tests that you're going to take a look at, so you can see if it's actually managing to exceed the locked-in, otherwise 60 frames per second to match the 60 hertz display. That also explains where you're going to see some occasional visual tearing, because we intentionally disabled G-Sync, and G-Sync does get rid of that visual tearing. So you've seen what 1080p looks like here in the Division's own benchmark. Now, if we increase it to 4K, the game settings, it drops down to 30 frames per second. That is too slow for a shooter like the Division, so you don't want to do that. And you can see how it looks running right now. It's, a little stilted. So 1080p a go, 4K not so much. Now as we move on to Far Cry Primal, solid on ultra settings at 1080p again. And you know, the 9 series of graphics cards, they really were best mated to 1080p displays. Even if you're talking about the desktop part, you can bring that up to 2K resolution and still have some pretty decent visuals. If you do 4K, you're really gonna have to drop your quality settings. So I wouldn't do that so much, but you can see how good it looks other than the visual tearing, again, because we have G-Sync off. The frame rates are at least at a minimum of 60 frames per second, and sometimes going up higher, especially when I'm petting my little helper friend animal. Lastly, we have Fallout 4, another very demanding title, and we're still playing at 1080p. We're playing on the highest possible settings, and we're doing 60 frames per second once again. This too is a game you could jump up to about 2K resolution, but 4K starts to drag down performance a bit too much. So it's a capable gamer with any of today's most demanding titles. Even a year from now, I expect it should be, because, you know, games get more and more demanding and sophisticated as each year passes. 2-3 years down the road, well, it'd be like having your desktop 980 and having not upgraded it. It's certainly tolerable. It really depends on how much of a need for speed you have and how cutting edge you want to be. If you're the kind of person who's looking at spending $3,200 on a laptop, you're probably pretty cutting edge minded. So again, hold off for the GTX 1080 version. So there you have it, the Acer Predator 17X, best of carried on your shoulder. It's a lot of weight. And here we have the power supply, another additional load of weight. What does this tell you? Well, it's a pretty serious gaming laptop, obviously, and thanks to the ginormous chassis, it does run very cool and very quiet. Granted, 17-inch gaming laptops are usually the quietest among gaming laptops, but this one particularly, considering the fact that it has a desktop card in it, is chill, it really is. Gaming performance is excellent. The display on this is good enough for pro apps work. And the only thing that's a little scary is that price tag. It's $31.99. Now, you can get it for $27.99 if you want to go with the 1080p display instead, but once you're spending that much money, I suppose you might as well go for broke. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos.